Today we're gonna learn how to make straps with this badass rogue belt harness assembly. Stay tuned. Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So in the last episode I made this dope rogue armor here, but it was only part of an overall build which Maddie had drawn here. So today I wanted to continue on with that by making like the belt and harness assembly. I also thought this was a great time to go over again how to do belts and straps and all those kind of things. So without much further ado, let's jump right into it and level up this skill. Now, as I said, this is an assembly that we already have the overall design and plan for here. Though, even though we have this drawing to work off of, we still need to make ourselves a template so we know kind of the measurements on everything. Now, to do this easily and cheaply, I'm just using this 2-ounce EVA foam that I have. But if you don't have that, no worries. You can just use like cardboard or paper or something. Now, quick rundown on this design before we get started. It not only has like a large waist belt with two actual like small belts that buckle together, but it also has straps that come up from those, almost like suspenders that go over the shoulder and crisscross behind the back. The purpose of that is when you're carrying like a bunch of like pouches and swords and all that stuff on your belt, all that weight, rather than sitting on your waist, is gonna end up on your shoulders. Not only that, but it's gonna give me a whole bunch of cool like areas I can connect stuff to, which I dig. Anyways, the first place I started was on my shoulder, where I just kind of put some of that foam over the top and measured out how wide I wanted the strap kind of cushion to be. Almost like a guitar strap, I wanted there to be a wide section where it actually sits on my shoulder so that a thinner strap doesn't like dig into me. With that thought in mind, I just kind of cut this shape out that I thought would fit in that space really well and help spread out the weight. I'm also keeping it quite thin because I don't want to lose this range of motion I already have with my armor. If it's real thick, by the time I get my arm up here, it's gonna start digging into my neck. Now heads up, I went into this with no like super plan with how I was gonna cut this foam, so I just cut a bunch of these like straps and whatever I thought was needed, knowing that I could adjust them afterwards if I had to. These I just taped into place on my mannequin, so I can see how it all goes together and fits. And I really like this general look. With it all laid out like this, I could plan all the hardware that I'm gonna need. Oh, and speaking of hardware, I just kind of have it hanging on some pins that I stuck into the dummy. I just thought that was a fun way to see where everything would connect together. All right, cool. After I made any of the adjustments that I thought I needed to for the look, it was time to actually get this stuff down onto the leather. Though I do want to warn you, aside from just kind of the general, especially the big piece in the middle here, I didn't take a whole lot of measurements. The reason being, I find whenever I'm working with straps or anything that's gonna be like adjustable somehow, anytime I've taken super accurate measurements or accurate measurements, they never ended up actually being accurate. I have to go back. So as you'll see, I end up cutting things a little bit longer than I need, knowing I will end up using the scrap at some point. Anyways, for this project, I am using this 7 to 8 ounce leather that I got from Tandy. This is the remnants from the last project I did, and I want to get as much out of it as possible. So using a straight edge, I cut a piece of leather about 6 inches wide that are gonna act as my kind of big belt area. I'm not sure what you call that. If you know in the section, kind of what would that bigger, chunkier bit of the belt be? I'm sure it has a name, right? Now wrapping this around me, it's falling roughly where I want it to, but of course it has just kind of those square boxy ends. I don't want it to have that. I want to have some sort of a like design or gradient or something going on there. And here's my first little trick. If you're not already 100% sure what you're gonna make, the best thing I found to do is to take a piece of paper or something that is the same size as what you're using, and then fold that in half. Now you can make cuts around what you think will look good, and know that when you open it back up, it's gonna be perfectly symmetrical. So even if it's kind of like wonky at first, once you open it up, the fact that it is symmetrical on both sides makes it look all right. And I was actually happy with that, so I use it as my template to mark up my leather and then cut both sides to have this design. Okay, so far I used a long straight edge to cut that big strip. And you can totally use that for this entire thing. For any of your straps or whatever, you can just use your straight edge, put it as wide as you want, and then cut. That'll work. But if you've got a lot of straps to cut, I cannot recommend one of these enough. This bad boy is a strap cutter, specifically for cutting straps. As you can see on one side, it has your measurements here, and then in between there's a razor. All you gotta do is line the measurement you want the strap to be up with the body of the cutter, and then use the screw up top to lock it in place. Then you simply pass your leather through it, and Robert, your father's brother, you've got a strap. Doing this in just a minute, I had a whole bunch of these little straps. Oh, those little straps, by the way, I cut out of a bunch of like, I wanna say it's 4-ounce scrap. Because again, whenever I'm doing a project with a bunch of straps, I never know exactly what I need, and I just knew I was gonna need extra. They do come in handy, so I'm glad I did it. Now for actually making the belts and the more like suspender straps, the long things, I needed a bigger piece of leather. For this, you're gonna wanna go with either like a double butt or a double shoulder cut of the leather. This just refers to the size / where on the cow the leather was. And the double butt or shoulders are gonna be long enough that you're gonna actually be able to make belts out of it. And the leather's gonna generally resist stretching enough to make it a good belt. Whereas if you use like belly for it, that's a stretchier leather, so your belt is gonna stretch a lot more over time. Now, before I could use my handy dandy strap cutter to cut my belts, I first needed to trim away this uneven area here. For that, again, I just used my straight edge and cut a nice straight line. This is gonna give me a good line for my strap cutter to follow. But clever, I hear you say all the way over there, how do I know what size to make my belt, like width-wise? Though that can kind of vary based on style and kind of how you want to play with it, the best way to decide is to actually look at the hardware you want to use. I'm gonna be using this pretty gunmetal buckle right here. And measuring the space on the inside where the leather actually has to go, I see that it's about 1 1/8 wide. Using that as a guide, I just set my strap cutter to 1 1/8 and then cut out my belts. Okay, you have the strap that is your belt. Let's prep it to actually put that buckle into place. First things first, you really should kind of finish off that cut off end. To do that, you can find anything that's kind of rounded or any other shape that you like and use it as a template. For me though, I just happen to have these half round punches, which make nipping off the end and giving it a nice shape super easy. Okay, so the way this works is the leather actually slides into that belt buckle and then loops down and gets secured to itself with either rivets or stitches or whatever. Though in order for a belt to work, the little stick in the middle of the belt, I believe it's called a pawl, that has to be like outside of the leather, right? We need to cut a hole for that little thing to come through. Not just a hole though, it actually needs to be enough room so the whole pawl can move back and forth freely. Otherwise, you'll never get the belt like into it or out of it. I messed up on that a few times when I first started and I didn't make that little hole long enough. Oh man, it was such a pain. It's such a pain to get things on and off. Now there are tools they make that will do this, like little punches that are already the right shape and everything. But I'm way too cheap. I'm way too cheap to buy that. So here's how I do it. All I do while it's still in position there is I take a pencil and I mark about how far I think that little pawl end will be. For me, a good rule of thumb is just kind of line it up with the bottom of your buckle here. I just make a mark in the center on both sides where that would land. This way, when I open it up, I have my gauge of how long that kind of opening needs to be. Next, I select a hole punch that's just a little bit bigger than the width of that pawl. I've really committed to pawl. I hope that's what that thing is called. Leave down in the comments if I'm dumb. Using that punch, I put holes right where I put my marks. And then I just use a straight edge to connect those two holes together. After my marks were made, I go in with a nice sharp razor knife and cut the space in between out, leaving me with this nice elongated opening. And again, after you position your buckle into place, that little pawl there should be able to move freely back and forth, and that buckle should be able to bend kind of back and forth as well freely. Now to hold the leather in place there, you have a few options. I like to put in rivets and I like to do them kind of stacked on top of each other, but you can put them side by side, you can sew it instead, you have a few options. For me though, while it's still in place, I just punch my holes all the way through so I know that they line up nicely. These I'll just end up locking into place with some snap rivets that I push in through the back and then connect the rivets up top. Though I'm not gonna connect them just yet, I like to die everything and finish everything off before I actually kind of hammer them into place. But the nice thing about cap rivets is once you kind of snap them, they generally stay put unless you really put pressure on them. Just a nice way to kind of hold things together temporarily. Okay, so with that buckle in place, I kind of put the whole waist assembly roughly together so I can get the spacing right and figure out exactly how long I need that belt to be. Then after marking that, I just use my little half round cutter to finish off the end. I do this twice because my design calls for 2 belts at the waist. Okay, so while we're working with straps, the actual like shoulder strap ones are gonna be connected via some D-rings that I have. So I wanna cut those to the right size too, so I just measure out those D-rings so that I know what size to set my strap cutter. Again, I'd love to give you an exact size. I didn't measure them. I just cut the entire length of my double shoulder there, knowing I was gonna use up most of it, and whatever I don't use, I'll use. I end up having this much left over, by the way, which I could totally use for something, 100%. Oh, I wanna show you one more cool thing with the strap cutter real quick that kind of makes things fast for me. Not only can you like use a ruler and measure it out or whatever, But assuming you have the template to the width that you already want it, you can just kind of feed the template into place and then just set the strap cutter to that. I did that with this shoulder bit here, cutting myself a strip that I knew would be the right width out of the waist leather that I cut off to make the ends straight. Then I just cut them to size and rounded the ends to give myself exactly what I needed. Seriously, I don't want you to go out and have to buy a whole bunch of tools, but man, having the right tools, I think this little strap cutter here from Tandy is like 20 bucks. Man, it's super worth it. I love this thing. Oh, and if you are just getting started in leathercraft and you want to know kind of what tools to buy first, I have a video on that right here. Okay, so now that I have all of my pieces cut, I'm gonna go ahead and use this edge beveler here just to go ahead and knock down the sharp edges. As you can see, doing this just nips off the corner, leaving me with a nice rounded edge compared to the unfinished edge that's right here. Just a heads up if you're following along on this particular project, because of the fact that I've already done like one part of this design in the last video, I knew that there were gonna be pieces that I didn't want to bevel the edges for, mainly like the belt and the little top pieces of the shoulder there. That's because I'm gonna end up putting another piece of leather on top that has like this cool gator print design. And if I went ahead and beveled the edges on those pieces, when I glued things together, you'd go ahead and see like a little space where they don't quite match up because that edge is missing. I just thought I'd point that out. Also, you're gonna see here, just around the edges of that wider belt piece, I'm dyeing it black. Again, that is because I am both lining the back of it with a fabric and putting another piece of leather over the top. And if for some reason like any of that breaks away or starts to peel off, I don't want there to be unfinished leather underneath it. Okay, so if you did watch that last episode, you'll know that I lined my leather armor with this really nice kind of faux suede fabric. And I wanted to do the same thing with this one on the belt and the shoulder pieces, but I wanted to add a little something extra because this is like his thief armor, right? There needs to be places to hide stuff. Not only that, but pockets are at a premium when you're in a LARP. Like, no LARP pants have pockets. We didn't discover pockets until much later, apparently. So I just went ahead and made a strip of this fabric slightly thinner than the actual belt itself, folded over the top of it, and sewed that into place. That's gonna give me the little top of a pocket with a finished edge. See where I'm going with this? I hope you see where I'm going with this. I then took that fabric and sewed it onto the fabric that would end up lining that belt piece so that 3 little pockets all line up inside of the belt. This is gonna give me nifty hidden inner pockets. Think of it as thief armor. I can just kind of reach in and pull out like lock picks, or like someone's like, do you have the missive? I'm like, I do, as a matter of fact. And pull it out. Oh, so slick. I really love that. It's the little things. Anyways, just like I did with the other armor, I went ahead and used Super 77 spray to spray the back of that belt piece and also the back of my fabric. And then once it's had time to become tacky, I carefully placed them together, making sure those pockets land right where I want them to in the center of that belt there, and then firmly pushing it all down into place. Now I made sure the fabric was a little bit bigger than the belt so I can go back in and actually cut away all the excess, which will make the fit absolutely perfect. If I cut it all first and tried to fit it in perfectly, I wouldn't have. For sure, I wouldn't have. This just makes it way easier, and again, it makes it perfect. Oh, look at how slick that is. The lining is so nice, and the pockets, they're pockets. I mean, you don't need them to be much more. Pockets are great. Now, as I said, that belt piece and those shoulder pieces are gonna have this really cool gator print made up of this nice 2-ounce leather here. Oh my God, it looks so cool. And once it's put together, it looks amazing. I'm so happy about it. Anyways, again, these I cut just a little bit bigger than the pieces they're gonna be going over, and then coated the backs of the gator and the front of those pieces with some barge contact adhesive. Once that had some time to set up, it was a simple matter of pushing them into place and then cutting away all the excess to make this super clean look. Oh my God, it looks so beautiful. I love how this stuff comes out. It's so nice. And of course, for those shoulder pieces, I just did kind of the same thing with the spray adhesive to glue on some fabric to the back of those. Now, I've used a lot of adhesives here. Just remember, whenever you're using any of these, there are a lot of fumes, so you're gonna wanna be careful and make sure you have adequate ventilation. But you know what kind of fume won't hurt you? That would be today's sponsor, Fume. But what is Fume, you ask? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device. I actually always carry it with me now. I really have come to like this thing. I like it so much, in fact, that I have two. I keep one down here at the workshop and the other one I just kind of keep with me. And as I said, it is a flavored air device, which is really cool. It's completely natural, there's no like electronics or anything, and instead of vapors, Fume uses these little cores that you put inside of it that actually like flavor the air as it passes through. They have a whole bunch of flavors. Lately I've been vibing with the crisp mint and the orange vanilla have been really, really good. Oh, they smell so good. But yeah, you basically just kind of adjust a little vent in the front of it here to decide how much air you want to pass through, and then just kind of sample the air. It's weird to say, but like, it makes the air taste good. It's nice. But this is especially nice for when I'm just kind of hanging out doing a project or like working on my computer or whatever. Having something that's just kind of there is nice. It kind of helps me focus. Not only that, but it has kind of like a little, let me see if you can hear it. They've made it so that you can fidget with it and it feels good. Now, if you're trying to stop a bad habit, or if you're just like me and just kind of like to fiddle with things as you think, Fume has a great deal for this community. Just head to tryfume.com/skilltree or scan the QR code and use the code SKILLTREE to get 10% off of your journey pack. This is a great product. I do like it, so if you're interested, definitely check that out. It does help the channel. Again, that's tryfume.com/skilltree and use code SKILLTREE for an additional 10% off. Okay, sweet, so with all of those pieces glued up, it's time to dye them. Just like the rest of the pieces, everything's gonna end up this USMC black. Now, I can't stress this next bit enough. With all of your leather, but especially with belts, after you have gone ahead and dyed them, you're gonna wanna clean them off as much as possible. That's because all of the dyes leave kind of a surface residue that will get on everything. I made a bunch of belts for Maddie and I when we first went LARPing, and they dyed our clothing all around here, everywhere they touched, man. I just didn't clean them off enough. Oh, the bad luck. And I found since they do have such hard contact with the surface of your clothing usually, that even wiping them off a lot isn't enough. I've actually taken to grabbing a piece of beeswax and just using that to wipe down the flesh side that would actually be touching you. That provides just a little extra seal there and stops that dye from being able to come off. While we're using beeswax, actually, I've also found that to be really, really good for doing the edges. So once you've beveled the edges, that's not really enough. You need to actually lay down the fiber of those edges, or else it's always gonna be kind of furry and messy looking. Now, they have actual product that you can use, like gum tragacanth, I believe it's called, where you put it on the edges, then you use your slicker brush to kind of make it lay down. But you can achieve the exact same thing with some cheap beeswax. You just have to kind of rub it all over the edge. Then sure, you can use your slicker, though for my money, that takes a long time and I just don't have the patience for it. Instead, what I do is I take a rag, I apply pressure to the edges of the belt, and then I pull it through as fast as I can. So even with your slicker, the thing that actually lays down the leather and makes it smooth isn't the force you're putting on it. It's actually the heat. You're burnishing those edges. And you can achieve the same thing with a rag if you're giving it good, you can feel the heat in your fingers if you just do it with your hand. That's gonna lay those edges down just fine. I've actually used the slicker and the rag right next to each other and I couldn't tell the difference. It'll save you a whole bunch of time, trust me. Okay, cool, one final step to treat all of this. I'm just adding some resist to the outside of my leather. This is gonna help protect it against the weather, stop other things from being able to stain it, and generally give it a nice shine and help it look good. Now, while I was doing this and kind of pulling the leather through the rag there, I noticed that these have a lot of stretch to them. That's because though I used it from the correct kind of part of the animal that you'd want to make belts and straps from, the thickness is off. Normally, if you want to make belts, you want something closer to a 9-ounce leather. That's gonna give you enough thickness and rigidity that it's not really gonna want to stretch on you. This being a 6 to 7 ounce leather just wasn't thick enough to stop that stretching from happening. And that worries me. I've made belts before, and over time, you can actually see the stretching. The belt thins out where it stretches. And if I'm gonna be hanging pouches and stuff from it, that's kind of rough. So to get around it just in this case, I went ahead and used my sewing machine and just sewed a line of thread along the edges. This gives it that extra rigidity because if it starts to stretch, it actually starts to pull against the fabric of the thread, which gives it that stop. It makes it so that I can't go any further. It's really good. Now, if you're just getting started and you don't have a sewing machine, there's a few options. One, you can go with the cheaper, thinner leather and just replace belts as you need to. They'll last a long time, just over time you're gonna have to replace them. You can go with a thicker leather just for your belts, or you could use a sewing machine. Even a regular household sewing machine, especially for something this thin, can work with leather. I actually did a video back in the day on how to make that happen. I also did a video, which I'll leave in the description. I think YouTube only lets me add so many at once, with like a cheap $100 shoe patcher from Amazon that is like my go-to. I love that thing. Was my go-to. I recently switched to a Tandy leather one. It's pretty sweet. Oh, one last thing I found works is actually if you just glue another piece of leather onto the back of that one, it adds that thickness and it makes it a little bit more rigid, though it is a lot more work. Okay, so now we have all of our straps and everything ready to go. It's time to assemble this mofo. Starting with the belt, I just went ahead and put the buckle into place, and then grab my cap rivets. Again, if you're new, a cap rivet just kind of has a stem and then a little cap that goes on top of it. All I had to do is feed the stem through the bottom of the belt, through my holes, and then add the cap to the other side. To lock that cap in place, there's a special little tool here that has a concaved end that'll perfectly fit the head of your little rivets. I just set those onto something sturdy and use my mallet to knock them into place. This will help keep everything nice and secure and lays that belt down nice and flat. Now, a belt isn't a belt without the little holes, right? Like, you can't adjust it if it doesn't have the holes. Now, normally the spacing of those holes for a regular belt is about 1 inch apart. Though you can fudge that and make it as much as you want. If you want to be able to like adjust it minutely, you can put them real close together, like a 1/2 inch or something. Now, when you're doing this, you can for sure just use a ruler and mark all along the center every inch or so. For me though, I like using this wing divider here. With it, all I have to do is set the little feet to be 1 inch apart, and then I just kind of walk it up the center of my belt. This is gonna make sure every one of those holes are spaced exactly 1 inch apart. Then I just go back in with my hole punch and punch a hole everywhere one of those marks are. Now I have some really professional looking, perfectly spaced out holes. And bam, check that out, that is a belt. That's a belt I just use out in the world, though it is very long. Now it is a LARP I'm gonna be using this for, so I could go ahead and just kind of wrap the belt, but since there's gonna be 2 of them, I think that's gonna end up looking messy. But that gives us a perfect opportunity to go over another kind of basic of belt making with leather. And that's making a keeper to kind of hold that excess there. You'll actually find a lot of your belts just kind of at home have this little extra ring or something that the belt slides into to help hold it flat against you. To make that, I first doubled up my belt and then used this 1/2 inch scrap of leather that I had in my scrap pile and wrapped it around the doubled up belt. Making sure that it overlapped itself by at least 1 inch or so, I marked how long it needed to be and cut away the excess. Then I went back in and marked on both sides, the top and the bottom, where that overlap happens. So the problem with overlapping it that way is where the 2 overlap, that's twice, that's the double thickness of that little strip there. We don't want that, that's clunky looking, it's gonna get stuck on things. So instead, we're gonna do what's called skiving. Skiving is where we thin away the leather so that it can kind of overlap with another piece without adding that extra thickness. To do that, you can just use like a razor knife if you wanted to, but for my purposes, I actually have this little skiving tool to make my life easier. Using it, I just start on the mark that I drew, and I evenly cut it away, going from full thickness down to nothing. I do that on the top of one side, the side that'd go underneath, and on the bottom of the other side. This way, once I put the 2 pieces together, there's a perfect transition between the 2, and it just maintains the same thickness of the leather all the way around. To keep them in place, I just added some barge cement to the top side of one and the underside of the other, and then stuck them together once they were tacky, giving me this perfect loop o' leather, which, as you can see, fits around our belt perfectly and allows all that excess strap there to be tucked away neatly. I just went ahead and cut both of these and then threw them on a string so that I could dip dye them to make them the right color. Okay, so you remember at the very beginning when I said I cut some random strips that I knew I'd end up needing? Well, I need them, I end up needing them. Basically, so we've got that thicker belt, that chunky belt, and then we have the 2 smaller belts. But I need a way to keep them together, right? Like they're gonna slide all over the place. So what I did was I cut those bad boys about 8 inches long, rounding off those edges and just using the lighter to burn the thread so that it stays in place. These I'm simply gonna wrap around that wider belt there. And since I also needed a place to attach the kind of more suspendery parts of this, I figured I could actually just loop a D-ring through the top of those and solve that problem too. So to do that, I just kind of folded one end of the strip over the belt and punched a hole through it. Then with the D-ring in place, locked them together with a rivet. Then just simply did the same thing on the other side. This gives me a perfect little space for my belts to be able to slide through. But that's still kind of messy for me. Though they're not gonna slide too far, they're still gonna kind of get a little wonky on each other. Maybe like overlap and stuff. So to further separate them, I just pushed them as far to the edges as I could, found the center, and then punched a hole through that, followed up by dropping a rivet in. This gives me now 2 specific spaces for my belt to sit, keeping everything all organized and nice looking. I did this 4 more times around the belt, again to keep everything nice and organized, but to also give me the connection points where I needed them. And that by itself looks slick. Like it doesn't necessarily need those suspendery bits. I could just use this like this as the belt. We're done. All of those little rings there could be somewhere I hang a pouch or like a strip for a sword or something. This is already really cool and it's got its little pockets. Oh my God, I love it so much. But we set out on a mission here, so let me finish it, because the rest of it's super easy. For the little shoulder pad bits there, I just did roughly the same thing, adding another one of those strips all across the top of it, and locking in some rings at the ends. This is really gonna help me spread out the weight across the shoulder. I also left the middle of it kinda open, thinking that maybe I might want to attach some other stuff to it in the future. Now, since all of this is going to be wrapping around like my full armor kit, I wanted to put that on while I did the rest of my measurements here. So with the armor in place and looking like a warrior lumberjack, I went ahead and threaded that strap through the D-ring in my belt and marked how long it would have to be to reach the D-ring in the shoulder. Now, because I want this to be adjustable, right? If I want my belt to hang a little higher or a little bit lower, I wanted a way to adjust those straps. So to give myself that, whatever that length is where it touched the D-rings, I then folded it over and made sure I had like an additional 6 inches or so. This will just kind of make it adjustable as I need to. But in order to keep those in place, I'm gonna need some sort of like a buckle or a button. I decided to go with a button, specifically these Sam Brown buttons here. These just have kind of a knobbly head on a post and connect to another little threaded post bit here. For my straps to accept those, I just punched a hole in the end, put the threaded post through, and then screwed everything in place. Now I haven't yet, but you're definitely gonna want to add just like a drop of super glue or something. Those things are notorious for coming unscrewed over time, and you're just gonna be doing your thing and your strap's gonna go away and you'll be freaking out. I've had a bunch of you warn me in the comment sections about that, and it's all been coming true. You're all right. Hubris. Now, just to make sure the holes were right, I kind of positioned everything where it would need to go, and then I felt through the leather as to where that button would sit, making a mark right there. Then, just like with my belt, I made 2 more marks, 1 inch apart. Now again, for these Sam Brown buttons, you're gonna need like a buttonhole, and they do make a tool for that. But I'm too cheap to buy it. I just can't bring myself to do it. Instead, I just choose a hole punch that's roughly as big as the shank of the button. So just under the round head of it there. Then after I punch the hole, I just use a chisel and use it to cut a line from the top of that hole, giving me this kind of keyhole shape here. That allows that hole to open up just enough so that you can seat the head past it. And that's all you need to hold it in place. Just make sure you position it so that the actual rounded bit is in the direction that the force is gonna be going in. I always end up getting that wrong, and I put it reverse and it just kind of starts to like pull its way down through that little line that you cut. Don't do that. I do that all the time. It drives me nuts. All right, so with that good, I made not only like the one that would go in the front here, but then connected a piece to the back of the shoulder strap and slung the whole thing over my shoulder, bringing that strap to the D-ring across my body in the back so I can figure out exactly how long I needed that. Once that was good, I did exactly the same thing I did on the front. And with both of those done, check out those suspenders. I'm such a fancied armored lumberjack. I'm very confused about what this look is, but it's pretty cool. Though there is one final thing to do, because it takes very little provocation for those shoulder straps to just kind of fall down. I need a way to keep them together. For this, I just came up with a really simple solution. I just made a 1/2 inch strap that I folded over on one side and locked in place with a rivet. Then on the other side, I added another Sam Brown button And in the middle, my little buttonholes. That little loop side feeds into the strap where it locks on the shoulder, hiding the end of it and giving it a nice clean look. On the button side, I just loop that around the same area on the opposite side, and then button it in place. And shazam, everything stays together and doesn't fall down. And look at this. Oh my God, I'm so in love with it. The whole thing is so slick, super useful, really comfortable. I can move around in it just fine. Dead easy to make. It's just a bunch of strips. Like once you learn how to make a belt, you could totally make this thing. A bunch of places for me to hang stuff off of. Even I saw one when I was researching kind of how to put this together where they took a strap and like that ring that goes on the shoulder here and the back ring, they added a strap across the two under your arm where they could hang a pouch. And then the bottom of the pouch is just another strap that kind of looped around one of those belts. So you could have like a pouch right here at your side. I dig that look. I'm not sure how comfortable it would be, but I like if you're wearing a coat over the top of it, you can just kind of reach into your pouch here. Oh my God, that's so slick. Or like have a knife there or something, right? Oh my God, just so many possibilities. And with that, I'm super close to done with this kit. Like the only last thing I need are the little bits of leg armor, which is why I added those D-rings down at the bottom. Those are gonna actually help hold that leg armor in place. That's the thought, at least. We'll see how it goes. But do let me know if you like this project. Leave it in the comments section below, like if you do something different or if you just loved it as it is. I'm super happy with it. I really, really like it. Though there's definitely like, if you were to draw a Venn diagram of like LARP scene and like leather daddy kink scene, I think it's a real close circle there. I'm heading off the comment section. I see you. Naughty. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. Now I wanted to take a second to honestly thank you all off of that weirdness. This is weird, whatever. But we just hit 150,000 subscribers. Oh my God. That's like, when I started this, I would have never thought we'd reach that. I'm really excited about that. So thank you all so much for liking what we do here and supporting us. It genuinely means just everything to us. So like, yeah, thank you for that. That's incredible. And an extra special thank you to our community over on the Discord. If you haven't joined them yet, man, they're so great. Like having that connection with them, being able to chat with them and just seeing what they put out. I check out all of these projects. These are amazing, and they're always putting out stuff like this. Not only that, but they're helping each other do it. Like as they run into roadblocks or they have any questions, the whole community there are crafters and creative people. And honestly, as I've become more busy with doing this and just general life, I swear they could care less if I'm there or not. They're just awesome and together and getting stuff done. I appreciate you all deeply, and you're one of the things I am most proud of. If you want to join this awesome community, link in the description below. And if you want to join us on an epic adventure, then you're in luck because Skilltree's going to Conquest, baby. We've got a whole video outlining the details right here. Definitely check that out. Conquest is the largest LARP in the world. It's over in Germany. And we're not only going there ourselves, but we want to help you go too. As such, we have like travel agents in place, a bunch of ways to help you, and our Level Up LARP competition where you could win a chance to go for free. Again, check out that video or the link in the description below for more details. I really hope you get to come with us. All right, I think that's all we got here. I got a whole bunch of stuff to get done before we gotta travel for our next LARP. As usual, if you like what we did here, consider giving us some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. You stay to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another great way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we could not do this without them. It's because of them we have the funding to buy any of these materials and try these cool things and just kind of show you what we're working with. And a huge thanks to our newest high tier level Patreon members, Tammy Dash and Stormy Mason. Thank you so much for your support. It's honestly really humbling that you care enough to make sure that we grow, so that's incredible. If you like what we do here and want to see us grow, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Oh, that rhymed. Alternatively though, you could also click on one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that supports us too. I'm gonna wait here and see which one you pick. Not judging you at all. Not at all.